Hello Cloud Gurus, and welcome to this lecture on Risk and Compliance white paper. To be brutally honest, this white paper is basically a combination of the last two white papers that we've covered, so we'll just whiz through it quite quickly. As mentioned in both of them, Amazon operate on a shared responsibility model. So they say moving IT infrastructure to AWS services creates a model of shared responsibility between the customer and AWS. This shared model can help relieve customers' operational burdens as AWS operates, manages, and controls the components from the host operating system and virtualization layer down to the physical security of the facilities in which the service operates. The customer assumes responsibility and management of the guest operating system, including update and security patching, other associated application software, as well as the configuration of AWS provided security group firewalls. So just before we move on, do remember that that only really applies to infrastructure as a service, where if you've got a managed service such as RDS or DynamoDB, etc., or workspaces, then it is Amazon's responsibility to patch up to the operating system level and of the actual individual hosts that are running that application, and then it's your responsibility to just make sure you secure that environment by using passwords, etc. So if we look at RDS, for example, Amazon will patch the underlying servers that are running that, say a SQL server. They'll patch the Windows environment that's running that underneath, and they'll keep that up to date with security patches and antivirus. They'll also patch SQL Server, the application, and then it's your responsibility just to make sure that you've secured that database. We'll talk about risk now. Amazon management has developed a strategic business plan which includes risk identification and the implementation of controls to mitigate or manage risks. AWS management reevaluates the strategic business plan at least biannually. So if they do ask anything about risk and how often the business plan is looked at, it's at least once every 6 months. This process requires management to identify risk within its areas of responsibility and to implement appropriate measures designed to address those risks. AWS security regularly scans all internet-facing service endpoint IP addresses for vulnerabilities. These scans do not include customer instances, so this is their own vulnerability scans on their own infrastructure. If you remember in the last section we talked about vulnerability scans. You can do vulnerability scans on the platform, but you have to tell AWS in advance. You can't just conduct it on your own, because that violates your terms of service, and that is an exam question. But in this case, Amazon do their own vulnerability scans. AWS Security notifies the appropriate parties to remediate any identified vulnerabilities. In addition, external vulnerability threat assessments are performed regularly by independent security firms. Findings and recommendations resulting from these assessments are categorized and delivered to the AWS leadership. These scans are done in a manner for the health and viability of the underlying AWS infrastructure and are not meant to replace customers' own vulnerability scans required to meet their specific compliance requirements. Customers can request permission to conduct scans of their cloud infrastructure so long as they are limited to the customer's instances and do not violate the AWS acceptable use policy. Okay, we really covered off compliance in the first lecture, so we're just going to rush through this. SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3. SOC 1 used to be SAS 70, which was quite important, but it got changed to SOC 1, or in the UK it's ISAE 3402. It's FISMA, DICAP and FedRAMP compliant, PCI DSS level 1 compliant. Remember that is to an infrastructure level only. You then would need to get a Delta accreditation to get your application certified as PCI DSS. Do not think that you can just deploy an application on AWS and start taking card payment details. You do need that Delta accreditation, and that is a common misconception in the industry. I talk to customers every day about this sort of thing. So ISO 27001 compliant, ISO 9001 compliant, ITAR, and FIPS 140-2. It's also got several industry-specific standards, so it's got HIPAA, It's got Cloud Security Alliance, and it's got Motion Picture Association of America compliance. Okay, and that really covers off this white paper. There's nothing really new in there from what we saw from the last two. The only thing is about risk management, and it's conducted biannually. So if you do see something that's in this white paper that comes up in the exam that I haven't covered, please let me know. And if you've got the time, feel free to move on to the next slide. Thank you.